I'd like to bring together three things plus one other thing that we said last week or in the previous episode. The first is the lack of critical thinking across the spectrum of financial crime, risk, and compliance. People tend to think that they know what they know, and that's all they need to know. And the problem with this is that they don't then know what decisions they should be making. They don't look at more information than they've got. They don't look to see what they don't know. And so we're seeing very poor quality decision making. And that's not the fault of the individuals, it's the fault of the system by which they got to where they are. What do you think, Des?
No, I would agree. I think because we all come from different backgrounds, which means that the experience or the depth of knowledge is going to be different. Even though I'm quite full of the certifications that are about there, because it doesn't teach you to think. A lot of problems nowadays is that the ability to think things through is probably down to the over-reliance on technology. I think I've mentioned before and written before about the fact that if I write more than 2 pages of something on a subject, I've even had the CEOs of company turn around to me and say, well, can you explain that to me in simple terms so I don't have to read this? Which means that there's no element of concentration or depth.
Is that basically that we're still trapped, that we're all trapped in this idea of the 3-minute song or the 30-second advert, that nothing has any continuity, everything just exists in that moment and is independent of anything before or after?
Well, if I can jump in here, I think we probably got in a roundabout way to the tyranny of now, where everything has to be done now. There's a loss of context, there's a loss of institutional memory and indeed actual economic memory if you look at management cycles running over about 7 or 8 years. So you lose both a historical, but also within that a predictive capability because it's simply not used. Whether that is voluntary or whether it's a culture that expects it, I think is an incredibly interesting question. Because the issue is, if you look at, for example, another industry which is declining somewhat in its levels of ability to do its basic job, the so-called mainstream media are losing out to long-form podcasts in terms of where people fetch their information. So maybe a bit hypocritical of me to say so, but if you take the benefits of that, you can run a discussion. You don't have to come to I think people want certainty, and we are living in an increasingly uncertain world, shall we say.
I think that's absolutely right, but are we not also creating that uncertainty by encouraging people to make very rapid decisions based on insufficient information and insufficient, as you said, the historical basis that gives us the information upon which to do that, the institutional memory. Are we making it so that it is impossible for people to come to reasoned decisions? And equally importantly, if they're not going to be looking at making reasoned decisions, why do they need policies and procedures if they're just dealing with everything on the hoof?
I think we come back, and I'd love to hear Des's thoughts on this, to a combination of, for example, when I'm lecturing, when I am engaging in sort of stimulating people's minds, I'm looking at them to develop judgment. And if you were not in the financial services sector in 2008, when the soft brown stuff hit the fan, you don't actually necessarily know what the lessons are of how you document a loan, or what you actually ought to be looking for as the market loses its confidence. Secondly, within that point, people are curious to know, but, and we've touched on this before, there is a huge issue around the level of regulation and what regulators expect, which is a belt, braces, and let's reinvent the mousetrap approach, in my view. Des, what are your thoughts? Am I being too extreme here?
No. I could go E.M. Forster. I think it was about 19 beginning of the 20th century, 1909, 10, whatever, he wrote a book called The Machine Stops.
Mm.
And in it, he said something along the line of the reverence long held for the machine has slowly turned into worship. And I think that's what's happening with AI, with the over-reliance on technology that's stopping the, going back to Nigel's talk about critical thinking, my idea that, or my thoughts that people have a very, very small attention spans now, and often don't think things through to the end, which is a phrase that I used to tell my own children. You didn't think it through.
So are we suffering from the fact that people don't play chess, they don't play Go, they play computer games where your only horizon is the next shoot?
Yes.
So there are no strategies in the way that most people operate. I know that there are strategies in some computer games, but a lot of the games are very much what you're doing for the next 20 seconds. I mean, Tetris, for example, the overriding strategy in Tetris is quite complex, but your horizon is only that one little thing that's falling down the screen. And was that when things started to change, when we started playing games like that, do you think?
Well, I mean, say the sort of modern game examples of where I think there is a big problem are test match cricket. You've gone effectively, people are no longer used to playing theoretically 5-day games where it all comes down to the last over of the last day. And they want it now. And that's one of the reasons why the Australians won such a handsome victory in the current Ashes tour. The Brits have given up on it. No. But anyway, that's before we go off topic. That's basically what I think. We have not encouraged that type of thinking.
I think the topic is, why do we not? Why is there a deliberate decision to which everyone is a conspirator to not think? We react. We don't think. We don't look at bigger things. We just say, "Oh, there's that. Let's do that," and then maybe we can sort it out later.
I think most of the regulations that have come out over the last 25 years or more force people to again lack critical analysis, because what the rules-based approach is doing is comparing what we're seeing to what the rules say, and the criminal actually is in that instance within financial crime. They're thinking they're constantly adapting their methods, which financial institutions have a rigid, almost unthinking compliance process that doesn't keep up with it. There's a different two people playing the same game from opposite sides of the net, one using a rigid process, the other using an adaptive process.
The expression that I used to use about that is that compliance people think in straight lines and criminals think around corners.
That's a very good observation. I think the thing for me is to build slightly on that is, as modern policing of financial crime requires the filling in of large numbers of boxes as you submit your SAR or the equivalent thereof in modern UK policing, it becomes filling in the box, not actually looking at what the hell's going on.
Are we filling in those boxes in this way because that's what the computers want?
No, it's because it's what bureaucrats want, and that is what this is the death of regulation through bureaucracy. Yeah,
but computers can only deal with certainty. I mean, I understand the fuzzy logic and free-form data and the like. And
yeah.
No problem with the technology. I can understand all of that. But when it comes down to it, Des had a list that he showed me a little while ago of all the different codes that you have to fill in for the UK FIU.
Yep.
I thought, why is it my job to decide which of these tiny details matters? Because I don't care what that crime is from a legal perspective, not a regulatory perspective. From a legal perspective, My
Yeah.
obligation is, am I suspicious a crime may have been committed? Am I suspicious that there may be proceeds of that? If so, report it. And that, according to the law, as distinct from the regulations and from what the FIU wants, and not just in the UK, everywhere, that, according to the law, is my obligation. My obligation is not to come up with exactly what offence I thought it was. Broad terms, yes.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming at, Nigel. But the problem is this: we are run by bureaucrats, and bureaucrats cannot be criticised for wanting more information.
But they're not looking for more information. They're looking.
Yes, they are, because they're asking you to identify the crime, when it happened, what the exact precise amount is. So they're asking for more boxes to be filled in.
Yes,
And
that's
also
that's what they're asking
to justify your decision making, or even justify why you are making that.
Yes, bureaucrats are important people in the UK.
The problem is that many financial crime institutions nowadays, the employees don't feel empowered to use their judgment and challenge assumptions, because they want to follow the regulations, which essentially is the same as any military place where you just follow the commands of the person.
So if we look at why the reason why we're holding this discussion today is as if we're talking to the people that are coming into this field for the first time. And what are they going to face that we didn't face? Where we had a much more structured approach to what we did, but a lot less structured approach to how we did it. And we were able to say, we're going to exercise our judgment, and we think there has been a crime here. We think it falls into the broad category of fraud. And after that, it's somebody else's problem. And then because the bureaucrats have come along and the data analysts and everyone else said, we want this in boxes that we can automatically filter into pigeonholes. That's where it's all gone horribly wrong. So the first thing that the people that we are talking to today have to bear in mind is that they are not actually expected to exercise very much judgment. They're just expected to do as they're told. They are an extension of the machine. The intellectual capacity, which is part of what our generation, as the founders of this entire industry, our approach was always to think first, act second. And the people coming into today do not have that. A, they don't have the background that we had, but B, they don't have that option because they are being told you have to work as an extension of the machine.
Exactly, and this is one of the
many companies I work with now, or have done in the last maybe 2-3 years. The board itself almost works on the mantra that if ignorance is bliss, then they're going to be the happiest people alive. Don't tell me, I don't want to know the problems, just give me the solutions.
Well, I think you get to the point in most organizations where, as you get higher up the organization, the problems are supposed to be dealt with by the juniors, but we're not equipping the juniors to do it.
No. I mean, this goes back to something close to my heart, which is about the type of training that people are given nowadays. The understanding of what financial crime is, the use of, dare I say, our years of experience of, we've seen how not to do it at the same time as how it's been done. They don't have that experience. Nobody, you talk to anybody. Mark mentioned 2008. You know, everybody of our age that's been around that long knows exactly what he's talking about. He didn't elucidate on it, but I bet there's quite a few people out there going, well, what happened in 2008?
Well, the same as happened 10 years before that, which the people in 2008 ignored. In fact, we knew in 2005 that the USA was falling into exactly the same trap as we'd had in the UK in 1997. And the USA just pretended that they were never going to have that problem, or they ignored it, or it wasn't even in the data.
Which is actually what worries me about the modern generation, because I have detected, maybe it's just as I age and it's part of a normal process, that is, what would you know? You're too old. And the issue about that is it's absolutely fine until the day after you repeat the mistakes that were made 15 years ago or whatever. And there is a horrific, this happens across financial crime, in banking, in fintech, in politics. You get we don't need to listen to you, and you don't. So we've got to work out a way of communicating with people who want to communicate, which is a two-way process, not as it's used in a lot of modern institutions where communication is top-down. We tell you what to think. Yes, go on, Des.
Communication. There's a limit to what people nowadays, because they're all on TikTok or Twitter, etc., that it's short bursts. Nobody has a concentration level that can last longer than 40 letters, 40 words. I don't know. Do you see where I'm coming from? Their concentration level is down, so they immediately switch off.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you see that on television adverts, don't you? Because television adverts used to be 30 seconds. Now they're often 8 or 10 seconds.
Yeah.
I'm unable to comment. I checked out watching ads years ago. They're so prevalent, so irritating. Somebody might happy.
It's time to go and make a cup of tea and a sandwich. The ad breaks are so long.
Yes.
Well, definitely.
So our message to the people that are coming in at this is you've got it tough because nobody thinks you need to think. But if you're going to do the job properly, you do need to think.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And what's happening is that for me, I see it nowadays that the job is getting more difficult purely because I can, if you want, the analogy against something called Brandolini's law, which Brandolini's law is says that the amount of energy needed to refute bullshit is in an order of magnitude bigger than that is needed to produce it. So it's a never-ending issue.
It is.
Well, we're seeing that it's taken 2 years for the voices criticizing so-called artificial intelligence to begin to be heard. But we are seeing that. But it's two years before there's enough noise being made on the contrary arguments to do that. And it's the same when you think about it. The cost of recycling a glass jar is higher than the cost of making a new glass jar.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody says, well, hang on a minute, why don't you just reuse them? Then you don't have to remake a new one at all. So you're right.
Well, I mean,
you
could come on to following on from that, Nigel. Definitely, one of the things that I've been looking at is a lot of the things that I think are suitable for recycling. And I read the back of them now because I've already got 3 bins for waste, recycling and food waste. But a lot of the stuff that I buy in the shops has the wrapping. And you'd think, well, is this recyclable, or is this lid recyclable? There's a new thing that comes in now, and I don't know whether I'm missing it or everybody's missing it. It says on the lid or the package, recycle at your supermarket.
Yes, and I've done that. Yeah,
that's 4 things we have to do with our stuff nowadays.
Yeah,
is that not complicated?
When you get to the supermarket, how many choices of bins are there?
No, it's just a big sort of wrap round. You stick these kinds of plastic for various things around, which they may or may not actually collect. There are certain parts of the country.
I'm still paying my local taxes.
Oh yeah,
they're not
not
doing it. They're not collecting my rubbish.
This is the whole point.
Outside my house,
yeah,
I've got all I've got all 3 bins being collected today.
Yeah. Yeah,
for the first time in 3 weeks, over a period where more rubbish, recycling, and food is being produced.
Yeah,
and so if you take that back to the people that are coming into our field, every day they are seeing more and more and more micro compliance things put on them,
which don't work.
Which just make their life more difficult. And then we're saying you can't do the job if you don't think.
Yeah.
But the,
Can
but the,
I just link this into what
Yeah.
Des was just saying about the recycling issue? There is a mountain of rubbish dumped in a place in Oxfordshire called Kidlington that's been there for years. Okay, Environment Agency, ultimately responsible, have known about it for 2, and they are only going to get around start clearing it in the February coming up. That is a result of bureaucratic thinking. That is the result of not my job, gov. And that is a result of not educating professionals into what they need to be actually doing effectively, because to do so encourages them to ask questions. And modern systems are all about do as you're told, not what you think.
and this is where the training that so many people are having is defective, because
Yeah.
they are the training courses, the big training providers are effectively embedded with the regulators, and the regulators are saying, this is what we want people to know, tell them this, and that's fine. And they're not saying, tell them something which will allow them to challenge us. Final words?
I think one thing I'd say to people coming into this industry nowadays is, do you want people to accept you as you are, or do you want them to like you? You can't have both in our compliance and financial crime, because you're often coming up with answers that people don't want to hear.
Yeah,
or it goes against it, and it automatically puts you against something. That's how
especially sales and marketing. Mark?
exactly. This will change. I think we're right at the raggedy edge of people believing in the control of the great algorithm. We could spend whole separate hours discussing that. People know that it's not working, and people will not accept, quite rightly, will not accept this. When it will change, I don't know, but hold the faith, pick your battles, gird your loins, because this is a difficult area that you've chosen to enter. But if you do it right, you can make a real difference. You really
I think that's
can.
one thing, isn't it? If everyone in this field is able to do the job effectively, the prime objective, which is crime reduction, can be achieved.
Yeah.
But at the moment, the prime objective is keep the regulator out of your organization, because any small fault will be used as an excuse to find big fault. And it is ridiculous that the defense against the regulators is currently the primary focus, it seems to me, of most people within financial crime risk and compliance. And for those coming into this, I feel very sorry, because it's a soul destroying business. It really is, or it has become one.
It can be, but as I say, keep the faith. We could call it character development. I seem to recall in the old days.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Take care.
Let's wander off
Thank
and
you.
leave this for other people to hopefully chew on later.